You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear.
Hello, Shoe and Show listeners. Welcome back to another exciting edition of the world's only and leading shoe business podcast. I'm your host, Matt Priest. I'm joined by one Thomas Crockett, who is our government relations extraordinaire. Thomas, thanks for coming back on Shoe and Show. Hope you're doing well, my friend.
Yeah, doing great. Thanks so much for having me today.
Yeah, of course. So let's get into intellectual property. There's been a lot happening on the intellectual property side, Thomas, for footwear. There always is. We do a monthly, actually, report on intellectual property filings, trademark, design, patent, utility patent, trademark filings for footwear. It's a huge report. It comes out every month. If you're an FDRA member and not getting it, shoot an email at info@fdra.org and we'll hook you up. But what's interesting about that is at the top of the report, we have summations of all the different ways companies are suing each other over IP claims. Sometimes it's one of our members suing another, and we kind of stay out of it. But at the same time, it's just a landscape fraught with bad actors, with cheating, with scandal, and the like. And Thomas, I think as we'll talk about today, the landscape seems to be broadening in a lot of different ways, and I think it's something that our members need to be aware of. But from where you sit at this moment in time, before we kind of get into the various threads we want to kind of pull on and untangle, what's the landscape in your mind from an IP perspective when it comes to footwear and from a global perspective?
Yeah, there's a lot going on in this space. I think when you have a situation of counterfeit footwear, that's always a huge challenge. Small shipments is a really big issue. You have millions, I think it's 2 million a day, small shipments coming in through the Postal Service alone. We've really seen that trend uptick with the pandemic. And so just trying to manage that the environment where it is easy to get counterfeit footwear to U.S. consumers is a huge challenge for the government, for Customs and Border Protection. It's a huge challenge for brands. You kind of couple that with platforms. There's a lot of counterfeit goods that are sold on platforms. Consumers may not even realize that something they buy on a well-known platform may not be a legitimate good from a brand. They think it is because it is on the popular platform, and so you assume it's been vetted, that it has the kind of the vetting of the platform, the approval of the platform, and that may not be the case. So that's a huge issue. And then we're dealing with all kinds of things where counterfeiters and some disruptors are looking for loopholes, ways around the system. One example, there's a case that we filed a brief in where there's a company that is trying to say that a counterfeit shoe is an expressive work of art, and so it needs First Amendment protection. And so that's a whole nother issue we're working on. But I'd say now it's harder than ever with the internet, with the rise of e-commerce, with small shipments, harder than ever for brands, and we're doing everything we can to try to stay ahead of it and fight the surge of counterfeits.
Yeah, so let's unpack each of those separately. Let's talk it from a global perspective. So we filed just recently comments outlining challenges for footwear brands globally. We filed those with the U.S. Trade Representative's Office in what's called the Special 301, that annual process that you and I have participated in for a number of years in now. But it's a way for us to highlight globally the markets where we think that counterfeits are running rampant, where we think governments are turning a blind eye, where we think governments have tried to pass certain enforcement actions or legislative initiatives to curtail counterfeits, but maybe they're not strong enough, or they're not IP courts to handle it, or the fines aren't robust enough. And so when you're an American brand and people have a demand for your product globally, there's going to be bad actors that come in and try to feed off of that from a secondary market perspective. And so we have the ability to kind of raise that with USTR, and then they put out a report. So we've done that, and I think to your point, with the explosion of e-commerce and small shipments, and then this increase, we have a high duty burden. People think about duties as not only it's kind of a cost to the consumer, but it's also something that creates incentive to utilize the small shipments de minimis route that allows for products to come in under that and maybe not be seized by customs, because it just 2 million plus packages a day come in via that route, and customs is not, they have to target their enforcement, which is a challenge. And so, Thomas, you pull together the comments and work with our members on a lot of those comments. What stood out to you this year that I think we need to highlight for our members as it relates to the landscape from a global perspective?
Yeah, I think one thing is to understand the importance of this process. So we go in and we file comments with the administration on this, with the trade representative. They take feedback from industry and they put together what's known as a special 301 report. And they use this as a framework for engaging with our allies on IP issues. We've seen this in practice when the trade representative's office will go out, they'll meet with a country, and they have these specific examples of IP shortfalls. So what we did is we went in and broke out, I think, 19 countries, starting with key footwear markets like China, Mexico, Brazil, Indonesia, India, Vietnam. What are some of the challenges we see? And also, we looked at best practices. What are some things that countries are doing well? And then we took kind of a secondary list of markets, places like Morocco, Algeria, Russia, places where maybe there's not a lot of footwear production, but there's footwear is sold there. And we talked about the challenges in these markets. And the reason we did it this way is we wanted to look at places where you have a lot of footwear production. You have the machinery, you have the footwear production knowledge that already exist in the country. And so it really is ripe for counterfeiting as well. And so we've seen that, for example, Vietnam, when a lot of sourcing shifted from China to Vietnam, we also saw a rise in counterfeit shippers entering that country as well. And so we really highlight very detailed and specific challenges for USTR. They'll come back to us with questions. We'll provide that. And then they'll take this report and use it as a tool to engage with our allies. So it's a really key report, and we're happy and excited to participate every year.
Yeah, I think it is a key report, and it just it gives us a platform to kind of point to USTR, and I think it informs USTR as to what actions or what diplomatic conversations they have between countries when they go and visit, or people of importance visit, talk to each other from the respective countries. All right, let's pivot over to the Wavy Baby case that you mentioned via MSCHF. So there's this case that's out there. You talked about how MSCHF is doing exactly what their namesake portends that they will do, and that's create mischief within the industry, where they are literally knocking off well-known products like the Vans old school silhouette. That is just the iconic Vans shoe. They take that, they alter it in some way. It's still you look at it, it's Vans. They add some waves to it, and they call it the Wavy Baby, maybe an elevated heel, a baby meme, if you will, is attached to it. And then they start selling it. And of course, Vans not going to be happy with it, as they should not be. But MSCHF's like, hey, First Amendment, baby. We're going to sell tens of thousands of these shoes while it's still the First Amendment. We've joined forces with a number of other groups to push back on that court case. And in the meantime, we've got this additional case. I know this is very confusing, but track with us here. This additional case with Jack Daniels and dog chew toys is in front of the Supreme Court, for which we filed an amicus brief in support of Jack Daniels. Because, again, the concepts are being considered by the court as to what is First Amendment protected artistic expression, and commercializing that artistic expression in a corporate way. And so anyway, you're much more astute at these as a legal mind, Thomas, but But talk to us more about these cases and the importance they play as it relates to the IP protection of footwear.
Yeah, I think the important thing. So the MSCHF Vans case is currently on hold right now because this other case is going before the Supreme Court. That's the Jack Daniels case is the one to watch right now, even though it's not footwear related. The footwear case uses a lot of the arguments. MSCHF used a lot of the arguments from this case that was in the Ninth Circuit, now before the Supreme Court. And so they're looking at different products, Jack Daniels and a dog toy that resembles Jack Daniels. But should that have First Amendment expression? Is it, is that expressive? The dog toy that looks just like the Jack Daniels bottle. And so how this case goes will have a big influence on what happens in the other case. So we filed a brief in that as well, and we're watching that really closely. And in both cases, we point out that it's important to consider the impact on counterfeits. If you were to treat a shoe as an expressive work of art, like a book or a play or a movie, then you could open up the door and somebody could say, well, even though it looks like this or looks similar, it's not trademark infringement. This is a form of art. And so that's just, not to simplify too much, but that's what we're really focused on here. And we'll have a lot of updates on that coming up. We'll know kind of soon this year what's going to happen with the Jack Daniels case. But that's another issue that we're watching closely.
Yeah, and I have 2 dogs. You have a dog. We've all been Petco or PetSmart or whatever, and you go and there's actually a whole array of kind of knockoff pet toys that look like a bag of Doritos or other items, other kind of bags of chips or candy, and they have some stupid like dog pun name to them, like dog Ritos or whatever. And I think you can think about what Jack Daniels wants to do is protect its brand equity, its brand image, and it's just not fair game or free game for companies to come in and just kind of track behind that or kind of ride on those coattails of the popularity of Jack Daniels and make money off of it. And I think that'll be a critical case. We have our eye on that one for sure. And I got the brief the other day, a hard copy of it. To see our brief under, with the United States Supreme Court is actually a pretty cool thing to be able to advocate in the highest court of the land on behalf of our members. So, so fingers crossed that court case rules in our favor. So we'll keep everyone posted on that. The last thing I want to talk about is kind of the broader kind of emerging landscape of IP protection, Thomas. And why I bring this up is that something caught my eye that I alerted our members to a week or two ago, and that's the use of artificial intelligence for design. Now we have a whole another episode on artificial intelligence impact on footwear, and we talk about this in that episode. But I will say that there's a website, thissneakerdoesnotexist.com, and it's using algorithms and AI after scraping the internet of 50,000 plus images of shoes, and it's creating these designs that actually do not, it's creating the designs of shoes that technically don't exist, but when you look at them, they look really vaguely familiar, to be honest with you. And so my question for kind of us first to ponder as we close out is, if we're going to be utilizing AI tools, and it seems to be inevitable, to help drive design, how much of that will play into the protection of trade dress and other key components of trademark and design and those types of things? How will all that play into protecting those when you've utilized an AI system that derives its output on input of real product? And so to me, that's a fascinating part of the future as we look towards the digital space. And I'm not even going to talk about kind of the NFT world and this again and Meta, and that's a whole different conversation. And I know the brands are ramping up their IP protection on that, and we've seen some cases between Nike and StockX, for example, on Nike protecting its brands across even digital spaces. But I'm curious to know more about like protection of your IP when an AI program is pulling from it and utilizing that inspiration, that input, or that data to push out designs that are derivative of original designs that companies want to protect.
I think the challenge is in DC with Congress administration, it's often very reactive, not proactive. And so it's going to be fascinating to see. There's this emerging technology, Chat GPT, for example. I mean, what does that pull from? How does it, all the IP issues? And this stuff is just now rolling out, and this AI technology, that's a whole nother discussion of how we react to that now that it's out there. What type of rules are put in place? How is IP addressed through that? That is an entire discussion. One other, with that too, on the reactive space, there's the whole issue with platforms, and we're seeing a series of reactions to what's emerged just in that newer landscape of e-commerce. We had just end of last year in December, Congress passed and President Biden signed a bill called the Informed Consumers. That's an IP piece dealing with platforms that would add some accountability there. So it's reacting. There's a reaction there to seeing counterfeits on the platforms. With this one, it would say for high volume third-party sellers on platforms, the platforms have to get certain information from these sellers. They have to get government ID, tax ID, bank account information, contact information to vet them. So if somebody's selling on the site, they have to be vetted if they are high volume sellers, which means 200 or more sales over a year period amounting to $5,000 or more. So you got this category of sellers. They're going to have stricter vetting by the platforms. And then the platforms also have to provide some information to consumers, some contact information, a way if you have an issue on the platform where you have a problem with the good that's been sold to you, there's a way to get in touch with these sellers. So you're trying to strengthen the platforms there. That piece is already passed. It's now law. There's another act called the Shop Safe Act, which would basically create a list of best practices, including seller vetting, banning repeat offenders, making sure that the platforms get rid of the counterfeiters on their marketplaces. There's a huge list of things that they have to do. And then if they do that, they'll have some protection from liability. So it's a stick and carrot approach. You do this, then we'll give you this benefit. And that's out there too. That's another initiative. So the first part, the Informed Consumers, has passed. The goal is to pass Shop Safe. President Biden has made a priority to focus on the platforms and making sure that there's legislation. This is what he wants. He wants a bill that stops online platforms from giving their own products an unfair advantage.
Right.
So that's another issue that is the focus of the president and Congress. So 3 separate bills that are focused on strengthening online platforms. That's out there. That's really reactive. And so going back to the AI discussion, that is an issue. We won't see that this Congress. As that technology rolls out, that may be next Congress or the Congress after, but there's going to have to be some sort of way to deal with all of the huge array of IP issues that spring up that we haven't even thought about with this new technology that's been unveiled.
That's a fair point. That's a really fair point. And I think the new landscape on IP protection will play out in the courts well before Congress even thinks about doing anything about it. Reactive is a great way to put it. So I think this conversation should kind of highlight the fact that the landscape is fraught with potholes and speed bumps. And if you're a brand manager or IP counsel for a brand, doing your best to try to protect, and you have cease and desist letters like auto generated and you're sending them out constantly. It's whack-a-mole to the nth degree. And so we wanted to make sure that people understood the landscape as it sits now, where we're headed, and making sure that you go to fightfootwearfakes.com, our website that categorizes and kind of pulls all this information together. It's an open source site, whether you're a member or not, and you can see the activities that we've done on behalf of the industry to protect their critically important IP. And so, Thomas, thanks for coming on today to educate us and to walk us through all these different initiatives and challenges that the industry is facing. And if anything, we're an innovative industry. The IP is a testament to that, but we're also innovative in the way in which we protect our IP. So our hope is that our brands will continue to work with us to explore ways to do that in a robust fashion. All right, folks, thanks for listening in to another exciting edition of Shoe and Show. You can hit all of our episodes at shoeandshow.com. Make sure you come and see us at shoeexecutive.com for our executive summit. You go to shoeexecutive.com for more information on that. That's April 26th and 27th here in DC. We'll be talking about AI impact on footwear. We'll be talking about geopolitical strife. We'll be talking about legislation and legislative initiatives impacting the industry. And we'll have a ton of great opportunities to network with your colleagues. A ton of awesome brands have already signed up. You can see all that at shoeexecutive.com. We hope to see you there. And until our next episode, we hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you on the next one. Until then, Shoe and Show is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.